Kupina kuphi emakhaya amadolobheni aseComplus takhona sakumukela kumbukelo ehlelweni lakho Yilungelo Lakho, it's your ride. Silethela ke lehlelo bukhoma lapha kumahamba phambili SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Mina ke ngisimpiwe ngqongwane. Mbukeli, are you one of the many distressed consumers struggling to keep up with your debt repayments? Well, before you're thrown into any panic and forced into reckless decisions, don't miss any of the options and tips that we have for you on today's show. Lady Yilungelo Lakho. As financially distressed consumers struggle to meet their debt obligations under the current economic conditions imposed by COVID-19, the lure of quick financial relief by dodgy lenders remains a dangerous trap. Well, a trap that leads to some signing off their valuable assets such as collateral security. But then, how do we avoid making risky financial decisions, protect our assets, and still keep our creditors at bay? Well, financial guru John Manyike joins us now via Skype to empower us with options and tips. Spinzasibena Timmy van der Grip. He's from the National Credit Regulator. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, John, how do consumers keep afloat kule sikhathi ke se-COVID-19 njengoba sihlaselwe kuleli bhubhane lesiliphethe?
Yeah, kumele ukuthi sibuyele back kule ndaba ye-budget vele besikhuluma ngayo, ukuthi kubalekile ukuthi umuntu abudgethe. Ngiyazi ukuthi kuzoba nzimanyana ngoba if income iyehle kakhulu abantu ba-worried ukuthi bazokhokha kanjani ama-bond name and so on. So, but then that's why it's important to ukhulume nama-credit provider la uthathe khona i-loan wenze i-arrangement. But before wenze i-arrangement kumele ubuze kuqala ukuthi ingaba unayo i-credit life insurance na, ngoba kukhona la i-credit life insurance.
All right, Tim, let me also welcome you to the show. It looks like it's a financial end of the road for some consumers. Is it not? I mean, what's your comment with regards to the kind of financial difficulties that consumers face?
There's no doubt that there's financial difficulty for consumers, and consumers find it very difficult. But the National Credit Act is there to protect consumers during this time. And you should remember that all consumers have the right to be assisted when they're over-indebted. So I think there's quite a few options that's available to consumers during this time, and I'm sure that we're going to be dealing with it throughout the show today.
And the government has announced a raft of relief measures to the distressed consumers. But then, is it just a temporary solution in your view, or is it a problem that's that's set to last?
As we saw, COVID will still be with us for a while. So we all need to work together to find a way to keep a lasting solution for consumers. End of the road is very rough, and I don't think that any consumer should see the situation like that at this time. There are various options that are available. As John alluded to, the insurance is one of the issues, but there are quite a few. And I think consumers should look at all those options first before they start losing hope and before they start, going to unregistered credit providers.
Alright, John, kubuya ngathi ke sesingene emgodzini longagcini lapha ngoba bantu ba retrenchiwe badendiwe labanye balahlekelwe ngumsebenzi labanye ke imiholo yabo ijutshiwe. Kuthi vele nje am I being optimistic nangathi nje no lesitomo lesisitawundlula noma ke vele singene emgodzini longagcini?
There's still hope, Baba Simpiwe. Umuntu ngeke athi hayi sokuphelile ngaye ngoba isimo esinje akusukuthi asijwayelanga ngaleyo ndlela ngokuthi abantu abafikelele kule level where bangakhona ukukhokha izikweletu zabo. Into ebalekile izathi mase ufayisana naleso situation yini ongayenza esemandleni wakho. That's why ngithi in extreme situations if kumele uthi uthengise indlu uthenge encane or ukhipha abantwana from i-private school ubafaka ku-public school into enjalo izinto ubonayo ukuthi lezo ngakhona ukuthi uzishintshe wena ngokwakho kumele usibheke lezo zinto ke yabona. So I don't think it's a case yokuthi akuna i-solution at all.
Nasaqala ke luhlelo ke John ukhulume ngendaba yebudget nekuthi kumcoka ukuthi bathengi bafunze kubudgeta noma ke babekele, and in previous shows we also talked about the importance of saving. Kepha ke John, mina nawe siyadla ukuthi you only save when you have something to save. You can't save when you have nothing to save. So bantu ke bagcine sebatikhanza sebangene ke kubo mashonisa ema loan shark. Ukuthi vele, is there any other alternative apart from ama loan sharks?
Yeah, njengoba sishilo ukuthi ukukhulumisana nama credit provider umuntu aboleke imali khona kubalekile lokho. And then kwesinye isimo we've got good laws in this country like the National Credit Act. Umuntu masakahluleke kakhulu uyakhona ukuthi applyele i-debt cancelling, and then ngaleyo ndlela angeke impahla yakhe ithathe ngoba u-applyele i-debt review or i-debt cancelling. And according to that law, I mean, if you have successfully applied for a debt review, there cannot be a legal process while a debt counselor is in that process of restructure ama-equality zakhe. So I think balekile ukuthi abantu babheke nokuthi umthetho ukuthi umuntu angathola protection enjani under the National Credit Act.
Okay, you've touched on a very important issue, debt review, and we'll ventilate that issue in just a moment. But Tim, let me also pick your brain on this. We know that most of South Africans are so underprivileged. Most of them are unemployed. Most of them have their salaries being cut. So therefore, they are forced to resort to loan sharks, as it were. So what is another alternative way of maintaining their livelihoods apart from venturing into loan sharks? What's your thoughts?
As John alluded, there are various issues that they can look at. One of the solutions that the NCR looked at over the last few months is the emergency loan. Consumers can go to a credit provider, a proper credit provider, not a mashonisa, and go and apply for emergency loan. It's important that they speak to the credit provider and they provide proof that an emergency exists, that you've lost your income during COVID or temporary or whatever the case might be, and emergency loans through a proper registered credit provider is definitely an option available to consumers during this time.
And there'll be circumstances which will certainly force consumers to use their assets, such as a house, as collateral to take up loans, to go to loan sharks or to go to any financial institution for financial relief. Would you advise them, would you advise against this?
When you have assets and luxury assets, for an example, those are things that you need to sell. Things that you do not need to start coping. But where you have collateral, and one of the questions we're going to deal with later is Westbank advising us that consumers are using collateral, their vehicles as collateral for these corner shops, and the people then just disappear once you've given them the keys. So you need to be very careful when you give any of your assets for collateral. There's certain things that you need to do, homework you need to do. The NCR can get involved. You can go to our website and see if the people are registered. But that would be the first port of call. We'll see if these guys are registered, if they're proper, and if they are bound by the law.
Yeah, you've just touched on a very important point that I've loved us to ventilate in greater detail, that of checking with the NCR whether a lender is registered. But then I would imagine it would be so difficult for us to persuade people from approaching these unregistered lenders, because their interest, they offer very attractive terms. For instance, even if you're blacklisted, you still have access to finance. Even if you have a low credit score, you still have access to finance. How do we run away from, from these unregistered lenders?
They unregistered for a reason, they are not giving you favorable terms. We've had some instances where the interest repayments were 50% or 80%. And that is just going to get you, as the consumer, deeper into the debt spiral. It is also very important to check that they are registered, because if they're registered, then the NCR can look at them and can receive complaints against unfair treatment against these credit providers. So going to loan sharks is not an option for consumers at this stage, or at any stage for that matter.
All right, Tim, let's leave it there for now. We'll certainly continue our conversation after this break. Asibambe lapho ke bekunene. Please join us after this break. Leli Yilungelo Lakho. Sanibukela futhi bekunene tincingo tethu sesivuliwe ukuthi nawe ungaba ingcenye kalolu hlelo sishaya licingo ke ku-011-714-6918 noma ke 011-714-6919. The numbers are on your screens right now. You can also email your thoughts to consumer@sabc.co.za. Ungaphinza usithole futhi na ku Facebook. Sina Tim van Griffle ulapha ke NCR, siphinde sibe na John Manyike ulapha ke uyi-financial educator. Now Tim, I want us to pick up on this conversation we've heard before we went to that ad break with regards to the modus operandi that is normally applied by these unscrupulous and unregistered lenders with regards to offering finance to distressed consumers at very, very attractive terms and conditions. What is that modus operandi that consumers should look out for?
I think the first thing you need to look at is where the credit provider is asking you for upfront fees. Now, upfront fees are unlawful in terms of the National Credit Act. The credit provider cannot say to you, give me 1,000 Rand and then we'll see if we're going to give you a loan. That is an immediate indication that this credit provider is not acting in terms of the law. And you will most probably find that such credit providers are scams. And that you will most probably not even get any loan amount from them once you've paid the 1,000 Rand or whatever the case might be. So that is a very, very good first indication that the credit provider is a scammer. Second, that we saw during this time is that credit providers do not supply their registration numbers. They do not supply their physical addresses, where their branches are, who they affiliated with. So it's always good to, once you've spoken to them, take your time, go to the NCR website and go and see if these credit providers are registered. Even if they're micro lenders, it doesn't matter who they are. They need to be registered with the NCR. And it's always advisable to go and check if they're registered first before you do any dealings with the credit provider whatsoever.
On the issue of the upfront fees that consumers are normally required to pay before a transaction takes effect, some lenders may argue that these upfront fees are also disguised as, admin fees, which the registered financial institutions such as banks also charge as well.
The fees are not upfront ever. It doesn't matter which type of loan that you take. It's included in the cost of credit. The credit provider, in terms of the law, have to make the cost of credit available to you to see how much the initiation fees is going to be, how much the interest is going to be, how much the total repayment of the loan is going to be. These are all things that the credit providers have to give the consumer upfront, and it's all part of the process. There are no payment of fees upfront for the loan. Or interest or whatever the case might be. It just does not happen. It's not supported by the terms of the National Credit Act.
Yeah, in terms of the National Credit Act, Tim, is it really a requirement to offer sort of a collateral, like a physical collateral, such as a car or a house? What does the law provide, and who decides on the kind or the type of collateral that I should put up?
If you look over the last few thousand years, collateral is the traditional way of securing repayment of the loan that you take. I mean, it's been around for thousands of years, but it is all in terms of the agreement that you have. So if there's equity in your home, you can go and get a second bond on your house, for an example, in terms of the equity. That is allowed. That is the normal way of doing business. But there's a few issues that you need to look at. If your car is still under installment sale agreement, that car is in fact not yours. That car is the property of the finance house that gave you that finance, and that vehicle remains the property of that finance house until such time as you've paid it off. So you cannot go without the permission of the credit provider with regards to your vehicle and go and sell that to somebody else or use that as collateral for a loan whatsoever. It is not allowed in terms of your agreement with the credit provider, and it just cannot be sustained in terms of the National Credit Act.
Okay, perhaps my question, Tim, is, who decides on what kind of collateral? Like, if the lender says that they want to attach my house as collateral, and I said, no, you cannot attach my house, but I could rather offer my life policy, for instance. Can I do that? Do I have the liberty of telling the lender of what I have to offer as collateral?
It is per agreement. You need to, if there are collateral required, you can see what collateral you have, what you are willing to part with or what you're willing to put up as collateral, and that is a negotiation process between you and the credit provider. There is no specific rules surrounding that, but the agreement and what they are willing to accept versus what you are willing to put as collateral would be the test with regards to these type of transactions.
All right, John, let me also bring you into this conversation. We are building a case here because millions of South Africans are distressed and they are forced to approach these unscrupulous and unregistered lenders. But no, noma ngabe ublacklistiwe stagnika imali, noma ngabe credit score yakho iphasi kakhulu stagnika imali, but then they charge ridiculous interest rates. So we're trying to build a case here. What other alternatives that are there at the disposal of consumers? Bangazama kuphila ngoba vele ukhulumile phambilini ngenza ukuthi ababudget wakhuluma futhi ngenza ukuthi abasave, kepha ke none of those options are available. So the only option kuboleka imali. What other options in your view should the consumers adopt?
I think kubalulekile ukuthi umuntu negotiate the credit provider laboleka imali khona. The fact ukuthi uyahluleka ukuqhubeka ukhokhe leso installment doesn't mean ukuthi awumelanga ukukhulumisana nabo. Nakhona kuyadependa ukuthi nawe usiphathe kanjani. If uyikhasimende ethembekile ekhokha ngesikhathi sonke isikhathi, nayo i-credit provider iyabona ukuthi lo muntu uyazama ngempela, and then bayakhona ukuthi bakwenzele iplan. That is why amabhank akhulume ngama-debt relief or payment holidays. However, even lawo ma-payment holiday kubalulekile ukuthi u-understand ukuthi yini, what is on offer here, so that now uma udecide ukuthi uyayithatha u-understand ukuthi izoku-affecta ngeyiphi indlela now. So the problem now is when abantu bafeel ukuthi akasakhona ukukhokha i-installment bese uyabaleka nawe awuthatha ama-calls, awuphenduli nama-mail afika kuwena, kuzo-create inkinga lakhe. That is why abantu baluza imizi yabo ney'moto, because they are running away and they are not engaging, they are not talking to the credit providers.
Now, ufuna ukuthi sikhulume ngawo kabanti ke John lokuthi asinegotiate nama-credit providers. Nanginegotiate ngiphethe ini, ngifike ngithini kubo? What reasons do I advance ukuthi no, angeke ngikhona ukubhadala, but this is what I have, this is what I bring to the table?
Obakhombisa i-budget yakho, obakhombisa nama-financial obligations wakho ukuthi i-quality zami then nami income ime kanje or iyehlile, and bazazibonela nabo ukuthi ayikho enye imali. Even if bathi bazokuyisa ecourt, if i-court ithi no, the only thing you can afford u-10 rand, ayikho into abangayenza. Mara lokho makuhluleka, kukhona amanye ama-company a-specialize ngoku-negotiate on behalf of ama-customer who are able to do i-debt restructuring. Enye futhi sikhulume ngayo earlier yile ye-debt counseling. Mase uhlulekile ubona ukuthi abakulaleli, uyakhona ukuthi ukhulume ne-debt counselor, a registered debt counselor ne-National Credit Act regulator rather, uthi nabo bakuncede, because umthetho wala ekhaya uyavuma ukuthi umuntu makahluleka uyakhona ukuthi ucele i-protection of the act ukuthi you can't afford. In that way, it means you are registered even on the credit bureaus as somebody who applied for a debt review, which means during leso sikhathi you cannot apply for esinye isikweleti. You need to finish the paying off the debts that you already. But during that period, you cannot lose assets wakho, you cannot lose your car and so on. That is why it's important to get into that process as quickly as possible. Don't wait until kube nama legal action. Once illegal action iqala bakuthumele court, you might have a problem being successful in your application you apply for i-debt cancel.
Alright, asishiye lapho kenzanga yethu sitaqhubeka nenkulumo yethu ngivakele likhefu. Kwanyalo asesithathe likhefu siphinde sibuyele etolo sitawuphinda sibuye. Don't go away. Leli lungelo lakho. Welcome back. Kumbula ke na umbukela ukuthi ungaba ingcenye lelihlelo kule nkulumo yethu ke namhla. You can call us on 0117146918 noma ke 0117146919. Ungasithumela futhi ne-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za. Ungaphinda usithole futhi na ku Facebook, and we are awaiting your calls. But kwamanje asasikhulume ke na Tim. Tim, let me bring you into this conversation. Now John mentioned distressed consumers. There are other options that are at their disposal, such as finding themselves a debt counselor or applying for debt review. How do we go about doing that? What are the conditions for that?
Speaker, I think what is very important is for consumers to realize that there can be a point where it is too late to apply for debt review. Like John suggested, if there is legal action, those accounts can be excluded. So it is of utmost importance for consumers to apply for debt review earlier than later. The earlier you look and you see that you have problems in repayments, the better it is to apply for debt review. Now, one condition for debt review is that you have to have some sort of an income. Debt review are not for consumers that do not have income, because what debt review is saying is that we have this debt outstanding. I have the right to be assisted as a consumer which is over indebted. Debt counselor, I would like you to speak to my credit providers, negotiate a lower repayment, negotiate a lower interest rate, so I can repay my debt to you. It should be kept in mind that the debt review is about repayment of the debt. It is not about getting out of your debt or not paying it. That is not the issue at all. Debt review is an extension of the terms that you have at a lower interest rate and at a lower installment. So it is very simple to apply for debt review. You see which debt counselors are in your area. You can do that on the internet, or you can do that on our website. You go to the NCL website and you look at registrants, and it'll tell you if that debt counselor is registered, what the address is, what the phone number is. And then you make contact with him, and you let them know that you're a first-time applicant for debt counselling, and they will take you through the process. It's a lengthy process whereby you look at the budgeting, you look at the credit bureau information, you look at what needs to be repaid, and your debt counsellor will then make contact with the credit providers, get certificates of balance to make sure that they have all the correct information for you with regards to your agreement, your balances, your interest rates, and all the rest of it. And then there's a process to follow. But I think, as John alluded, it's very important to understand that all your assets are safe. Once you have spoken to a debt counsellor and that debt counsellor is looking at your application, they cannot issue summons, they cannot proceed to come and take your assets.
And I'm sure that comes at a cost, the very cost that these consumers do not have, because debt counselors, as it were, they are also business people. They run a business. And this, to some extent, is a double jeopardy for the consumers, is it not?
No, it's not. The debt counselling process works in month cycles. So all the credit providers, when they have received notification that the consumer is under debt review, immediately for 2 months do not expect payment. And that is in terms of an industry agreement. The first month in which payment is due, that fees will go to the debt counsellor, and that's in terms of the industry agreements. The second month payment is for the attorneys that will be representing the consumer at court, bringing the debt counselling application there. I think at this time, let's just mention that it is not necessary for consumers to appear in court. So they should not be afraid that they're now going to be dragged to court in front of a magistrate. It's not like that. The debt counsellor with its attorneys can appear on behalf of the consumer at court, so they don't have to be worried about that. Only in the third month, in terms of the industry agreement, can the credit provider then expect a payment in terms of the reduced interest rate and reduced installment, which the debt counsellor then negotiate on the consumer's behalf.
So John, indzaba debt review, does it offer some sort of relief ku consumer ngenzaba yokuthi some of the installments phela ayehla noma ke kuba ne consolidated installment as it were? So ucabanga ukuthi vele nje debt review, is it the only way out?
Well, definitely it cannot be the only way out ngoba and before ngikhuluma ngezinye indlela ngifuna ukustressa ukuthi if ufuna i-debt counselor, you must also verify ukuthi le debt counselor lane is registered in the National Credit Regulator. There are a lot of so-called debt collectors out there, and people are crying about its service that they are getting from ama debt collector. Bana complain regarding ama debt collector. So you need to reference check, deal with a very professional debt counselor. Unfortunately, National Credit Regulator is not in a position to recommend any specific one because they have to be fair. Mara, they will have a database of debt counselors that are registered now. But now, Melwenzi reference check, even if you are paying, you must still verify with your money is actually being paid to ama credit providers, because anything abantu bakhala ngayo is that imali ithathiwe mara ithatha isikhathi ukuthi ifikelele kuma credit providers, mara interest iyacalculator whether imali ifikile or ayifikanga. So those are some of the things umuntu abele asibheke. And then of course another option, again, there's no one size fits all for abantu. There's an option here, debt consolidation, where you can possibly look at one single service provider who's going to pay off all your debts. Then you only have one credit provider to deal with. But even when you do so, you must be cautious ukuthi ungahambi uyothatha enye loan on top of a consolidation. Ngoba bakhona abanye abantu ba consolidate i-consolidation. Angazi ukuthi ikhona into enjalo. Umuntu ayi-consolidate uthatha i-consolidation. That's another option. Enye indlela Brasimpiwe is that mawunemoto and because of the lockdown usebenzele ekhaya and you have a car insurance, you must speak to your car insurance company ukuthi bona angisaye emsebenzini ngisebenzele endlini. So it means i-risk profile yakho i-improvile ngoba imoto ayihambi kakhulu, which means nabo unganegotiate nabo bakwehlisele ama-premium for your car insurance. Lokho kuyenzeka nakho ngoba it cannot be good. You're still going to be paying the same installment yet usebenzele ekhaya. Enye option, enye indlela yokuyibheka lento le ukuthi okay, if you are still in the office, then you must check with, okay, is it better to use public transport or to use your own car? Of course, there are other concerns with if the taxi industry is going to be loading a full load, kunamanye risk that people have, but you need to explore whether it's a lift club, but kumele ubheke yonke into empilweni yakho ehambisana nemali ukuthi yini indawo la angayehlisa khona equality or ngehlisa the way ngispenda ngakhona imali, so that you are able to cover igap eonayo.
Okay, let's also pick up on your point, for purposes of trying to generate cash flow in the eye of the storm, coronavirus. I want us to crunch the numbers. And if maybe I'm just jumping the gun. Say it's cost 500,000 rand and installment yami 10,000 rand ngenyanga. Ngiyayithengisa ke leyo moto, maybe ngithengisa nga 400,000, khona unothenga ke imoto lencane ya maybe 50,000, but ngiyachubeka ngiyibhadala le installment yelibhange lo 10,000 rand a month. So mina ke lapho sengikhanza sengina 300,000 in liquid cash. Would you advise me to do that?
No, I think it comes down to numbers, Brasimpiwe. Ngoba if uzothengisa imoto, remember if value yemoto iyayehla, as soon as you keep imoto ku dealership, value iyayehla. So the chances are what you owe the bank versus what you can sell the car for, there's a big difference. So even when you do that, you must do your calculations kahle, so that you don't find yourself uthengisa imoto and you, let's say you even sell it privately, or even with dealers where you end up you still owing a bank. So you need to do it very cautiously, do your calculations properly. Mara ikhona into I think i-mention lapha ebalekile uma ukhuluma nge-generate income. Enye inkinga esinayo is that if umuntu abona ukuthi imali yakhe iyashota or mhlambe uholo balehlisile emsebenzini, we are stuck because we can't think ukuthi yini into engizoyenza ke ngibudgetile ngehlisile ngikhathile la ngikhatha khona mara kuyafana. So again, we must also be thinking ukuthi is there a possibility of generating another income through another way? So you need a side hustle eceleni ukuthi ukhona ukucopa, but we're just not thinking, but is there any other way that I can have a side hustle to increase my income? So it's not only good about restructuring your debts, but you must also explore with the and I'm sure as abanye bazawabona ama opportunities ukuthengisa something or ukwenza something eceleni ukuthi bakhona ukucopa, because we just can't rely on a single income when we see ukuthi izinto asihlangana.
Kevakala Manyika, siyabonga kakhulu-ke kulelo phuzu lelo-ke. Bekunene-ke namhla sikhuluma-ke ngebungoti bekuthatha ama-asset akho noma-ke impahla yakho lonayo uyibeke as i-security noma-ke ubambise ngayo ukuze ukuthi uthole ema-loan njengoba-ke sathi ukuthi siseshica kuleli bhubhane le-coronavirus. What are the difficulties the difficulties of putting up your assets such as a house or a car as security to get an unsecured loan? Let's take our first caller, Sna Machaya olapha eCape Town. Sekumole hleleni sawubona. Machaya, siyakumukela ulapha Cape Town. Welcome to the show.
Siyabulela dada, ngiyabulela nami ngena kule show yena. Ngibukele apha TV.
Okay, siyabonga baba. Khuluma nathi baba. What's on your mind?
Baba, ngithemba ngena apha ku debt review kando nyana nje ibiza ngegama andeziyes. Into eyenzekile ndangicinga ukuthi ndifuna indincede so that I can generate at least some money for living at home, because amatyala amaningi kabi. Now ngoku into eyenzekile xa ndizifumanisa when time goes on, I think after unyaka ayifumanisa uba zikwi-areas imoto zikwi-areas and I can't afford now to pay them. Now ndaqonda ukuthi mandiyeke ndingaphinde ndibhatale kwaloo nase-debt council, which means that now ndifuna icebo lophuma mna because I have a star now se-debt review. Now ndifuna uphuma andazi no mhlawumbi nalo icebo.
Ngicela kuva kahle-ke babela uthi wa-aplayela i-debt review because bhonga sakhona-ke kuchubeka netikweleti takho and then wachubeka nayo le debt review ikusebentele yini?
Angisebenzelanga because ngithe ekugqibeleni ngose ndibona ukuthi ndikwi-areas mandibhalelwa futhi like kwindawo zinamatyala kwii-creditors zam zandibhalela yangifuna ukuthi heyi ndikwi-areas zamatyaleni am. Ndanyanzeleka ndiphumile ndizibhatalele, then ndabhatala ngokwam amatyala am, sendibhatala ii-areas zemoto, ndibhatala nezinye. Now ndifuna ukuphuma ndisuswe laa nto kuthiwa kunesitamu secala kwegovernment se-debt review, which means ndiyazibhatalela ngokwamatyala am, andisabhatalela i-debt review.
Okay. Baba Machaya, siyabonga kakhulu ukusishayela-ke. Thina intethu-ke titakuphendvula emva kwaleli khefu. Let's take another commercial break. Sitaphinze sibuye. Khumbule ukuthi namhla-ke sikhuluma ngetindzaba-ke letitsinzana-ke nokuboleka timali such as debt review, debt consolidation, ikakhulukati-ke nebumcoka-ke bekungathathi ama-assets akho njengendlu njengemoto uwabeke ubambise ngawo ukuze ukuthi uthole i-loan. Siyabuya khona nyalo. Leli Yilungelo Lakho. Welcome back. Our participation lines are now open. Sishayela ke licingo ku 0117146918 noma ke 0117146919. Send us an email or catch us on our social media platforms. Sinaye ke eline John Manyika is a financial educator from Old Mutual. Siphinde sibe na Tim yena ke ulapha ke National Credit Regulator. Le office ke leli regulator ke tindzaba tonke te credit nakubolekisa kwetimali. Sikhuluma ke namhla bekunene ngebungoti bekuthatha ama assets akho uwabekise or rather uwabeke as a collateral noma ke as security ukuze uthole i-loan. Now John, we had a caller earlier on Mashaya lapha eCape Town. Uthi ke yena abenetikwene letiningi kakhulu wazigcina sekaye ku debt review. Kepha nje letikone solo tiyachubeka uze ungene kuma areas. So he wants out. Ufuna ke kuphuma ke kule debt review. Uthi angenda njani?
Yeah, I think into eqale ngiyibonile ku mangilalela i-story sakhe is that makangicela ukungena ku debt review ama credit provider bewamfonela. And umthetho uthi umuntu maka apply debt review, ama credit providers can only speak through to the person through the debt counselor. They cannot contact the consumer directly. Sometimes ama credit providers can call umuntu bamthuse to a point la fika utshila ukuthi no, hey, lento la emsebenzeli bese ke lapha ayenza enye arrangement directly nama credit provider. Ilento ngibona ngathi iyenzekile kubaba lapha eCape Town. So that's why, you know, in most cases, abantu apply debt counseling already they are in arrears. And if installment is on behalf of the person by debt counselor, it goes without saying, you're not going to see improvement. Arrears immediately. It's going to take a while. That's why you also need to be patient with the process. As long as you've got the right debt counselor, I will explain sometimes negotiations with credit providers can take a bit of time. Or extend the term or interest. The challenge with a person who has applied for debt counseling, for you to upuma debt counseling, clearance certificate, so you know, it's not a case where you can just decide because it's registered with all our credit bureau. I'll hear from Utimi if he has got anything to add from a national credit regulator point of view.
Okay, singakaye ke team John, ungam advise ukuthi endeni ke bamashaya lapha eCape Town. What should he do? Should he opt out of the debt review or should he continue up until you know, he fulfills all his debt obligations?
Mina bengizothi akabuyela futhi ku debt counselor ambuze ukuthi kwenze njani ukuthi why lama credit providers amfonele yet under debt counseling ngoba there's no credit provider ezoba ukuthi izofika ethi ayikho aware ukuthi umuntu ku debt counseling ngoba register lento loku all the credit bureaus that the person has applied for debt review. Therefore, they cannot be calling and threatening the person ngoba that's called harassment. So you cannot be harassed by credit provider if you are under debt counseling. So mina ngibona ngathi ubaba mhlambe bamhlukumeze kakhulu uthi upon la afila ukuthi athuke bese afuna ukwenza ama arrangement. Mina bengizothi akasihlale phansi ne debt counselor yakhe bavumelana ukuthi why labantu bamfonela and then I debt counselor ibhalele labantu laba ukuthi bangamcontact because it's unlawful to be contacting umuntu whereas it's clear ukuthi lo muntu is registered.
Nangabe ke bachubeka bamharasa angenda njani angaba reporter ku NCR noma ke kunoma ngabe ngiphi inhlangano?
They can be reported because they are harassing you even though you have applied for that counseling.
Okay, Tim, just a heads up. We had a caller, Machaya, from Cape Town here. He applied for debt review, and then during that debt review process, he got numerous calls from some of his creditors saying that he is under so many arrears. So therefore, in a way, they were threatening him, and he now wants out. So is there an option of opting out of debt review?
Spirit, it depends on where you are in the process. There are various stages in the process. The first is the early assessment stage. If the caller is in that early assessment stage, it is possible to get out of debt review. It would not be in his best interest if I listen to his financial position. But if you are in the later stages, when the consumer has already been declared over-indebted and the credit providers have accepted lower interest rate and lower repayments, it is more difficult to get out of debt review. And then there's a third stage where, as I alluded earlier, where your lawyer takes your matter to court. And where there is a court order, then you cannot get out of debt review until such time as all the debts under that court order has been paid. So it would depend where in the process he is. It is always good to start with your debt counselor, say that the credit providers are harassing me, what is going on, and report that to your debt counselor. So your debt counselor can see with your credit provider what is going on. Is there a gap in communication? Were they not included in the plan, or whatever the case might be? Your debt counselor is your first step. But if you then get continually harassed by credit providers, then you can report that directly to the NCR, and the NCR will take that up as an official complaint.
So in the first stage of the process, you say that he has an option of opting out in the first stage, but then what would happen to their debt obligations? What would happen then to their lenders or creditors if they opt out of the debt review?
Now remember, your repayment of your debt will remain. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. The debt you have to repay to your credit providers. What debt review does is giving you an option through the debt counseling rule system that everybody agreed to. Credit providers will say, okay, we will accept a much lower type of interest repayment for the debt over a longer period of time, so that we can free up some cash for you so that you can buy your necessary household expenses. You know, it's important that you have food to eat before you pay your credit obligation. So, and that is what debt review does. It brings your installment down so that you can have sufficient money to look after yourself and your family for the foreseeable future. Now, the early stages is before you were declared over-indebted. Then you can easily exit. And that is especially true where consumers are not really over-indebted, where the debt counselor do the budget and do the assessments and see that you're not over-indebted. When you are declared over-indebted, that means that your debt counselor has now negotiated the lower fees, or the lower interest and the longer repayments, and the credit provider now starts to bind himself to that agreement with you. And that is why it's much more difficult to get out of debt review at that stage, because your credit provider has now bound themselves to your current circumstances and your lower repayments. That is why it's more difficult.
All right, thanks for that point, Tim. Let's leave it there for now. We'll certainly continue the conversation after the break. Let's take our final ad break. Nasihlangana futhi ke sitawubuya ke. This is our last segment of the show, Yilungelo Lakho. Saqhubeka futhi nenkulumo yethu ke. Khumbula ke mbukela ukuthi namhla sikhuluma ngebungoti ke bekubeka ama-assets akho, imoto noma indlu noma ke yini lonayo nangabe ufuna ukuthatha ke i-loan noma ke ufuna ukuboleka imali tsite ke noma nganguphi. Tim, just before we wrap the show, you know, creditors in the end need their loans paid back. So how far can a creditor go in enforcing an agreement against a defaulting consumer now that we've already ventilated the issue of debt review?
Yeah, as stated earlier, the credit provider is entitled to the repayment of the loan that he made you. So I think I just want to quickly bring in here the issue of credit life insurance. A lot of products, most of the products for that matter, has got a credit life insurance for consumers built into the installment. So it's not that you would see on your statement that there are credit life insurance somewhere else. It's normally included in the installment. And what that credit life insurance does, it protects the consumers in terms of debt or retrenchment or loss of income, unemployment, a disability, and the rest, where that credit life insurance then pay your installment in terms of that credit agreement for a 12-month period. So I think consumers need to be to check if they have this type of insurance. like I said, it's not necessarily you can see that from your statement. Make contact with your credit provider and see if you can access that type of insurance, which can give you good relief for a period of 12 months or so. But getting back to your original question, they are entitled to enforce the repayment of their credit agreements. There's a process that they need to follow. There's notifications that they need to send out, and then they need to issue a summons, which goes through an official process through the courts. There is a magistrate or a judge involved, depending on the amount. And then the consumer can then get an attorney that can assist them, or they can do it themselves. So it is a process, not something that will fall out the sky. Someone will be at your gate to come and take your car. There is a process that needs to be followed.
Right, great point you made there on the issue of credit life insurance. Now, John, sesizimvile ke team usichazele nge-credit life insurance nakuthi ngisebela kanjani. Kepha-ke, do you get a sense ukuthi-ke ama-consumers bayatshelwa kahle in greater detail ukuthi-ke what are the circumstances that will lead to the credit life insurance kicking in?
Yeah, esikhathi esiningi abantu mabaya-apply i-loan bafocuse kule ndaba ye-loan ukuthi bafuna leyo mali ngoba of i-situation abakuyo. And even if bachelor, I don't think a lot of people remember or even are aware ukuthi banayo in instances where they have. So that's why uteam ati no, go and find out with your credit provider ukuthi kule loan yakho ingaba ikhona na i-credit life insurance, and if ikhona bakutshela ukuthi what are the terms of that credit life insurance. You would find with different banks have got slightly different terms and conditions. Although broadly speaking, especially when loss of income. So they have different approaches on how they deal with credit life insurance. Especially abantu abazoretrenchwa or retrenchile, because the first thing before we end the arrangement, buza ngale credit life insurance so that at least ikhokhele ama-installment wakho up to 12 months or until you find a job, whichever comes early. So indlela mele si approach ngayo le ndaba ye-credit life insurance. Find out if you have.
Okay, John and Tim, great chatting to you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Let me thank my guests for their time and for their valuable insights. Join us again next Monday for yet another live consumer affairs discussion. From Miss Mpio and the rest of the team,